What piece of Canadian history lies just kilometers away from Stonehenge, and what is its connection to the Battle of Vimy Ridge? We are west of London, flying over Stonehenge and the garrison town of Larkhill. North of Larkhill is where the Canadian Expeditionary Force arrived to complete their training during World War I. The troops first arrived on October 18th of 1914, greeted by rain and chilly temperatures. And over the course of the next few days, 30,000 men would set up camp on the plain. Not all in tents, as eventually huts would be built to house the men. The Salisbury Plain as a whole would not only be home for the Canadian Expeditionary Force, but also troops from Australia, New Zealand, and artillery from Britain. At first, the men would live on the plains themselves, but over time they did start being billeted in nearby towns. While many of the men had received some training in Valcartier, Quebec, it was here on the Salisbury Plain the Canadian Expeditionary Force would have that training rounded out. Men became proficient in the use of the Ross rifle, even if it wasn't necessarily the most efficient firearm and was replaced shortly in 1915. In fact, over the course of the training, it became apparent much of the materiel from Canada was not up to par. Boots would rot off the feet of men in the camp, their shovels were too flimsy to be useful, their rucksacks had too many flaws, and in the end, much of the Canadian equipment would be replaced. As the training continued through the harsh conditions, the time of deployment to the front drew ever closer. Then on February 9th, the first men from the Canadian contingent had landed in France. The life on the plain was over, and now the harsh realities of war would greet them in the trenches of France and Belgium. The men of the Canadian Expeditionary Force would go on to the Battle of Kitchener's Wood, the Battle of the Somme, and most famously, amongst all the others, the Battle of Vimy Ridge. What piece of Canadian history lies just kilometers away from Stonehenge, and what is its connection to the Battle of Vimy Ridge? We are west of London, flying over